Hey up! This is a little VOD time lapse for Callisto's torso rigging. Firstly, there was a little bit that wasn't recorded. What I did is there's the two pecks are on separate layers and the torso is on a separate layer. I just glued the parts of the torso to the peck deformers, just so the torso around the pecs will also move when the pecs move. Another thing I did was, since the torso is just one art layer, I duplicated it 3 times, clipped the top one to the second one down, and then the third one down I made just a tiny bit bigger so its line art would stick out. That means I could move the top layer and have it masked, but the line art would still appear. It's not exactly the most ideal setup, but it's handy if you've just got one art layer. Before I got started, I blessed the art cutting gods, and I also thanked them for this chunky boy I got to rig. This is an optional step. Okay, let's get into it. This VOD was played back at 600% speed, but you can slow it down on YouTube if it's helpful. For the torso XY deformers, there's one overarching one, then there's 2 below that, one for the pecs and one for the masked torso layer. Most of the heavy lifting is done with these deformers. The main one is 12 by 16 I think. There's no special technique or anything for the movement of the torso. Just simple things like good references help a lot, clean, accurate art, and a good understanding of anatomy and form. You can see I'm also doing a lot of checking to see if the movement looks right. Even if you don't have the best art fundamentals, a lot of references and checking if things are right, and a decent amount of patience will get you there too. If you're a client looking for this degree of movement, generally it's not really needed. This was just more for fun on my part. So if you're interested in getting something like this, make sure you discuss the time and costs associated with it. That's all I have to say for this part, so I'm just going to be quiet and turn up the music. One thing to note here is if you do a reflect on something that's vertical, you'll get this effect where it's transferring that motion to the bottom and not the top. It's not helpful in a lot of cases, but in this one it was handy because I wanted some hip Y movement too. So I just duplicated the warp deformer, transferred it to a new one, and used that over the top for the hip movement. To add a little bit more dimension to the abs, I made sure there was points within the grooves of the abs, and also some on top. I selected these ones and added them to blend shapes. These blend shapes were an X and Y torso, which I put as an output for the torso X and Y physics. Passing tracked movement through physics like this is called sometimes augment physics or physics linked movements. The name is a bit confusing, but you can search augment physics Live2d on YouTube to find an overview of it. find the quickest way to clean up the corners that are calculated is just to select all your deformers, then pull down the outward facing side and pull up the inward facing side a bit, then just do some corrections from there. Already done the physics before stream, but I just added a little bit more movement here now. Each peck has two deformers for physics, both have an X and Y. The first layer has overall sort of mass movement, so it's just a left and right movement, and the second one is kind of like a ripple. The main thing you want to account for here is just keeping the volume. Make sure it has that dimension when it moves, and also have squash and stretch on the physics. That just means if you make one bit smaller, the other bit has to be a bit bigger, just so it keeps overall volume. That's the rigging done. The last thing was tweaking the physics linked movement, which as I mentioned before I won't be covering, just because it's a bit of a thing in itself. I can quickly go over what is linked up if that's helpful though. The torso X follows the head X with a bit of delay and an invert toggle. The torso Y follows the head Y a little bit, although if it was too high it would look a little silly. There's another input on the torso Y, which is head position Z. That's when you get closer or further away from the camera. So you can sort of lean into the camera and the character will lean a bit too. To make the lean in a bit more convincing, the shadow on the neck is extended, and the position Z tracking is also input into the head Y, just so it moves up and down a little bit when they lean in. And that's it. Hope that was helpful and the VOD recording format is okay.